next up, we are going to be diving into cybersecurity. We have a great panel for you. Cybersecurity, often as some of my CISO friends say, is often treated like insurance until something goes wrong, right? So this panel is going to talk about how to quantify the ROI of security investments, compare the cost of prevention against the cost of breach, and build a budget case that actually lands with finance and leadership. Our panelists today joining us on stage, Lee Provost, CTO at Flagstone, Philip Denker, CTO and co-founder at Yodo, Katerina Vetrakova, Global Director of Privacy, Security, and AI at Lime, Nick Meredith, Director of Engineering and Architecture at the Open University, and moderating this panel today, Mackenzie Jackson, Developer and Security Advocate at Akedo. A warm welcome to our panelists today diving into cybersecurity. Please join us on stage.
Excellent. I got given a cup before I came on here. I don't know what I'm meant to do with it, but I'll put it down there. But yeah, thanks everyone. This is quite the setup that we have here. It's quite comfy. A couple of housekeeping things just before we get started. I want to remind everyone, I want to try and make this panel engaging. So I have a list of all the questions that I want to ask. I'm being very selfish in here, but you do have the ability through Slido to ask questions yourself. I'm not going to try my best to keep an eye on them as we go, so we won't wait till the end. So if something comes up relevant to the conversation, please feel free to kind of ask that along we go. I'll do my best to try and keep the relevant ones there so I don't just ask all the questions that I want, but I'm still going to do that. But we've brought together a really interesting panel here that goes across multiple different spectrums of various company sizes and industries. So we have financial industries, we have consumer, we have global hardware and tech, and we also have universities and big behemoths. So trying to get a pretty broad perspective. What I thought we might do is just so everyone can kind of get to know the panelists, I have a kind of a bit of a question derived for each one. So Lee, I'm gonna start with you. You've lived through every CTO's dream and nightmare of rebuilding stuff, dealing with big legacy systems and moving forward. One question I have for you is, when it pertains to security, how does security fit into legacy systems when you're trying to rethink them? How do you deal with that and try and deal with the debt and also, I guess, the culture of how the systems were built in the first place when trying to reinvent, redeploy, and get rid of legacy systems?
Well, it didn't feel like a dream when I was doing it, though. So, I think with the hindsight kind of view, it was probably one of the best things we did as a business. So Flagstone, a cash savings platform, we've been around for almost 12 years, I think, more or less. And as many businesses who've been around for 10 years, more or so, you start accruing a lot of debt or cruft, historic commercial decisions that the founders had to make in order to win deals, right? And over the years, you can see the vast complexity of your system increasing. And as many companies in kind of high growth mode, you don't really pause to say, actually, let's deal with this. And one of the biggest kind of enemies of cybersecurity is complexity, especially when, over the 10-year period, the likelihood that everyone who was there from day one, who designed some of the requirements are still there, is not the case. And so that was, for us, one of the biggest drivers for, okay, maybe we do need to pause and set us up for success for the next 10 years. And so the kind of complexity, cybersecurity risk was one of the biggest pillars of the kind of the motivation behind this.
Yeah, I love what you just said about complexity as the biggest enemy of security. It's something I'm definitely going to steal and claim as my own. Philippe, let's move over to you. For those that don't know, Yoto, a company that you co-founded and the CTO of, you build products for children and also for parents. So I think security kind of hits different when you're talking about this kind of space, dealing with that demographic. How do you think about security and how do you kind of build it in with everything that you're doing with kind of higher stakes, when reputation is kind of everything here?
Yeah, so we treat it basically as a fundamental feature of the product. So we're a kids audio player for children, and the same way you would expect it to play audio, you would expect security, especially in the children's space. So it's always been designed with the security in mind, and it's sort of almost non-negotiable. Well, not almost, definitely non-negotiable that actually the security is equally important as everything else, more so.
Yeah. And Katharina, we've done panels before you. You've been in large companies before you. We're a very large company now, globally. So Limes obviously builds hardware manufacturing. One thing that interests me is you have to deal in huge amounts of frameworks. I think every country I've ever been to now has a Lime scooter somewhere that I trip over. But how do you get executives on board and not just throw frameworks at them, not just throw kind of regulations? How do you actually get them to understand security and get their buy-in when you're dealing with such global issues, global frameworks, hardware, software, kind of pretty much everything difficult?
Yeah, I would definitely say you never deal with 29 or 63 or 36 frameworks. You're trying to deal with one, and you will tailor that to the specific business. The first thing you do is recognize that the business is a living, breathing organism and has a priorities that they want to achieve. And you try to understand how the business operates and how it makes money and what is important for the C team in that specific business. In the business I worked at previously, C team could have known about security frameworks because it would help them win deals. And that was something they could market because it was so deeply attached to the product. In the current business, that's definitely not the case. They care about something else. So I think you really need to connect with them first. And you need to show them that you're not there to just show them a paper of requirements. You're there to further the business in its mission. So I would say your job as the expert is to translate the requirements into something workable for the business. And you talk to C team as people who will care about that much more than they will care about ISO 27001.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I mean, people also care about ISO 27001, but only
only in certain circles.
Yeah.
Certain circles.
Only super nerds. I want to move on. Nick, I have a question for you. We were discussing before, you've had a really interesting career because you've been the CTO of smaller companies and startups. You're now kind of a director of, I think, probably one of the biggest behemoths that is possible. Yep. Open University is the largest university by student count, by fear margin, we were just discussing. So how do you build security into this realistically? And I think especially what I'm interested in is at the scales that we're talking about, security almost needs to become a culture thing because it's too complex to understand everything. So how do you go about building security culture and combining it with engineering culture? And throughout your career, not just in kind of the big behemoth that you're at now, but also other areas that you've done through your career? Yeah,
I think it's obviously a very different kind of question based on the organisation you're in, but really the common thing that I've learned that comes out is that you have to kind of build it in rather than bolt it on. Mm-hmm. So if you think about kind of a startup, because we're starting from scratch, we were able to make sure that both from a cultural perspective, people understood that everybody in the business was responsible for security. It wasn't just the tech guys, but also building in the right tooling and things into the pipelines as soon as possible so that we could make that happen. Open University obviously is a massive, as you said, massive organization. It's got huge, 300 or 400 systems, a mix of legacy technology, modern technology, and a complex organization involving academics and commercial people. So it's a very complex organization. And I think the way we are approaching it there through our security team is, again, we're looking at it at different levels. We're looking at the culture. So we have the statement that sort of says security is everybody at the Open University's problem, or I think it may not be a problem, but it's responsibility. But at the same time, we're on a journey in the engineering side to just prioritize and pick things one at a time. So again, we're starting we have a lot of stuff around engagement and culture with people, but we are starting with kind of tooling and practices again, and making sure that we can get things into the pipeline to start to kind of show the scale of the challenge. I'm not saying we don't know where we are, but we're kind of going on a modernization program, adopting new engineering practices and adopting kind of modern engineering systems and things. So that's how we're doing it. We're building it in rather than bolting it on, so that when a team is delivering a project, they don't suddenly find that when they do a pen test that they've got another 4 weeks worth of work, and they have to, or I have to go and explain that to somebody in the business.
Yep.
It's how can we kind of avoid that type of stuff and just make it part of the fabric, really.
Yeah. Building it in, not bolting it on. I
Yeah.
think that's a great statement. Another one I'm going to steal. I'm going to have some great lines after this panel. So we did have a document with questions that I had outlined and prepared, and we all looked at it. We're going to go off script because we already have questions from the audience, so no pressure. But here we have a great question. Security can always be more strict. It has no limits. Where do you draw the line? I love this question because it is very true. We can always kind of do more, but at some point we still have to deliver a product. We still have to deliver services, and we can't always just be doing security, as much as security nerds like me believe that we probably should sometimes. So where do you draw the line on this? Lee, you're in my eyesight, so you're gonna if you have a kind of opinion on this.
Yes, it's risk reward. I could probably clear our whole technology roadmap and focus for the rest of the year on security investments, and there will still be gaps at the end of the year, right? So it's about thinking what are the potential risks you're exposed to. So one example right now is we, as probably most companies, are accelerating our adoption of AI in the product engineering organization. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of that world feels a bit like a Wild West, right? That a lot of the vendors prioritize new models, tooling, and all the kind of administrative type of enterprise governance you would expect of a lot of these tools simply is not there. And so either you can say, well, we're not going to do any of that because it's too risky, but then you need to offset that against, well, if we can ship a brand new revenue generating initiative maybe 1 or 2 quarters ahead of time, well, what's the trade-off, right? And so, one of the risks of using one of the agentic kind of coding systems we use is, well, it can delete all the files on your computer. And it's like, okay, well, is that really that bad if that happens, right? And that's the risk-reward thing. And sometimes you just say, it's fine, we accept it, I will deal with it along the road, this journey that we're on.
Yeah. Philippe, you said that one of the factors is that security is a non-negotiable for you. It's built in right from the start throughout it. Is there a line that you draw in terms of when we need to start focusing on the product?
I think maybe I'm going to contradict now a bit.
Yeah.
But yes, it's non-negotiable, but sort of we define with our sort of the leadership within the business the risk appetite. So where it's non-negotiable, zero appetite for, let's say, anything concerned with children's privacy or exposure to harmful content. But on the other hand, there's a lot of other areas where actually you might focus less on, or you can accept some risk, let's say, I don't know, voucher fraud on the website. So if people are abusing vouchers, it's not the end of the world, doesn't harm anyone, it just harms us as a business, and we take the risk that actually whatever that costs us, it's worthwhile not focusing, and then shifting the focus on where it does matter. So not everything is treated equally, and making sure that actually where you focus on is where it matters.
Yeah. No, I think that's great, and that's can be clear where you're drawing the line, segment it out into different components, and draw the line and the non-negotiables on the segments that matter.
Because you can't make everything perfect.
No, exactly, yeah, and there's always going to be some risks. And is that abusing vouchers, or is it delivering harmful content to kids?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a clear choice there. Katerina, I want to ask you, like, when it comes to hardware and software, you're dealing with kind of multiple facets. I'm always, whenever you're dealing in spaces like hardware, you can't update it, right? So how do you draw a line on kind of when something gets shipped out, when you're dealing with things that kind of, you know, are out there in the wild, tripping people over? And no, I'm kidding. I'll promise I won't make any more jokes. But, you know, out there in the wild, you know, how do you deal with and draw a hard line on security in that?
That is a very hard question. It's a very expensive question. So I would say you have to deal with a shelf life, of course, of a product. There is an ROI. It's a business that needs to make money at the end of the day, of course. But you try to design in a way where, specifically at Lime, everything is modular. So things do get exchanged very often. If you do ever get to see the magic of the warehouse, it is a very impressive operation. So number one, the parts are designed specifically to be modular and exchangeable, especially at the high touch points every day that the vehicle receives. So that's the magic. And then there is a lot of money that goes into it. So we generally monitor how the parts are doing and what sort of risks are present when they are out on the street. And then over time, we obviously exchange them as needed.
We're getting lots of questions in, but I had a question that I really wanted to ask you, so I'm going to selfishly ignore them for just a moment and ask my question, which is that if you were building out one slide or one document that you were presenting to your leadership, whether that's your CEO, your CFO, or just the board or whatever, and that on that one slide you had to put, what was the most important things that you want to get across to get revenue, to get buy-in on security? What do you put on that one slide? So, Nick, I'm going to throw that. You're closest to me now, so you're in the firing line. What would you put on kind of the one document, the key elements to try and get buy-in from finance, from management, from boards?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think the conversation's moved on a lot. So certainly at the OU, maybe 10 years ago, you would have been having to put a big case in for, you know, security investment and that kind of stuff. And I think the conversation has moved on. But what I would be doing is not talking about kind of technical things and vulnerabilities and that kind of stuff, and rather talking about outcomes. So, you know, what's your sort of tolerance for how long would you prepare or be okay for a certain system in our university to be down? And, you know, and explain how security can sort of influence that positively or negatively. And the other side of it is also sort of we work with a lot of partners. I think you talked about that earlier. In this day and age, nobody's going to want to work with you if you can't demonstrate you're doing the right things and doing them in the right way from a security perspective. So we would be definitely talking about outcomes rather than vulnerabilities and that kind of stuff. Moving away from the technical stuff and just talking in their terms, I think, commercial terms.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. Outcomes and not just kind of technical jargon. Yeah. Comes with that. Katarina, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions on this topic. So if you're ever a security expert or you have a security expert who's coming to you, to the room, talking about specific vulnerabilities or specific controls, I would ask them why and really push for the, you know, why does this matter to the business and their understanding around how the business is run. Because at the end of the day, you can do as many things or as few things as you want, and you should do those that have impact on your business. And you should think about the longevity of the business, exactly as you said. So we're looking for outcomes. You're looking to maybe prevent an outage, but outage could be done through many things. It doesn't have to be just security. So you really plan for scenarios rather than doing security well.
Yeah. No. Planning for scenarios, I think that's key, and I think you're both touching on it. Philippe, do you have anything?
My trick is to actually just grab the news headlines. So basically, any kind of vulnerability you can think of or concern you might have, you think it needs addressing. You just put it in Google. Yeah. And you get all these big brands with all these big breaches. And so if you just slap it on the slide, that usually gets the point across. Like, you don't really want to be in this company and the damage it can do to the brand, especially in our case with the children's and, you know, the trust being there.
Yeah, absolutely. You see companies that can survive a headline, but I think there's certain segments like what you're in that those headlines will be different, and rebuilding that trust especially. Lee, from the financial perspective, being what you were in there, what are the key things that you would present forward to try and get buy-in from the execs?
There's nothing more convincing than telling an exec member, this will help you stay out of prison.
Whoa!
So that's the opening statement, and then we go to the numbers. But all jokes aside, you can you can do modeling on impact. So, for instance, to justify a significant increase in cybersecurity spend, it was very much around, okay, so we have around a bit over 19 billion in assets we administer for clients. Imagine we have a headline statement around, Flagstone got breached. Let's say 10% of our clients lose trust and pull their funds off our platform. What is the revenue impact of that, right? So is it 10%? Is it 5? Is it 20? I don't know. But you can do modeling around those type of things. You can do modeling around successful fraud attempts. How much would that cost the business? And when you then look at some very conservative scenarios, and of course it's all, is it likely or not? I don't know. When you add those up, then that actually funds quite a decent kind of cybersecurity initiative in your business.
Yeah, I love that.
But it's insurance, is right. That's really it.
Yeah, getting them on board. I love the jail trick. I'm going to steal that if I ever need to present it. We have a lot of questions here around about AI, so I want to dive in there. So we have one here at the top. What's your take on regulator compliance view on AI native future, where, say, a human doesn't review AI code, but AI does? I think this is kind of really interesting because we are dealing in a world where we have AI-powered security. Claude Code released Claude Code Security, which made headlines. There's AI-powered code quality kind of sections. So, yeah, I guess, what's your opinion when it comes to compliance and regulation? Katarina, you're looking at me. You made the mistake of making eye contact. So I'm gonna start with you. How do you think we're going to deal with this?
I think in a very difficult way. I think this is ultimately a very difficult problem, and I think there's a few questions actually on the list that link into this. It's a new thing, right? We haven't necessarily, as humanity, I guess, battled with the question of what happens when we're no longer necessary. And that's very uncomfortable. And I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon either. I think it's just going to be a very, very hard question to navigate for everyone. I wouldn't advise people to do code where human doesn't really do anything at all, because as we've heard previously, I think human is necessary to the orchestration and is necessary to provide the correct context of your unique business, because your business isn't like the next 100 that is out there. It is unique. It's got unique architecture, it's got unique approach, it's got unique selling point. So I don't think that can go away completely. Mm-hmm. I think in some aspects it probably will, and we will all have to adapt to it. But I think we should do it like with anything new. Mm-hmm. Measure and test what happens when that safeguard of a human or someone who really understands doesn't exist anywhere. So I wouldn't advise you to probably just commit to prod every single time you feel like it. But you should definitely think about your transition plan.
Yeah. Let me rephrase this question to move along too. Is who of you would be in favor of regulation on, or compliance frameworks coming about to deal with AI-generated code and how we deal with that? You'd be in favor of?
I would be in favor if, obviously, it could happen faster, but that is a hard job to do.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of people out there who think that being ethical is a optional checkpoint. I don't think it is. And I think someone needs to help us with that point a little bit. So I'm very welcoming of the EU AI Act, which is not burdensome at all. It just states a few things that you should never do, which I think probably everyone in the room upon leading that list agrees on.
Yeah. Anyone have opposing view?
Not an opposing view. I think I agree with that. My only, well, I think you mentioned it, we don't want something that's going to add friction to what we already do.
Yeah.
And just on the previous point, I think in the same way, we need guardrails. So there might be a future where you could delegate some of the safer stuff to AI to maybe do, but have guardrails to really support them in the same way that you wouldn't put a junior developer in a situation where they're making a decision that could be catastrophic for them or the business. You know, you have guardrails or whatever. And I think that's probably what we're going to end up having to try and navigate. But I don't know where that line is right now. And we're going to have to test and learn to see how we go. Certainly at the OU, we've got a very risk-averse regulatory team. So it's going to be a very long journey for us to go down that route.
Yeah. How do you manage with those like regulatory issues and things? Do you find that sometimes that approach stands in the way of engineering, but also I guess sometimes like security and infecting real change? Because sometimes I feel like we can chase frameworks and compliance outcomes rather than security outcomes. Yeah,
for me it's involving regulators or compliances at the very beginning of the conversations rather than at the end.
Right.
It's similar to the building in versus bolting on thing I was saying earlier. Because if people are involved at the very beginning, then you're not landing them with a surprise later down the line. Mm-hmm. Getting people involved, or your regulatory teams in helping you to create your processes and things like that, I think.
Yeah.
I used to be director of product engineering at Compare the Market, and we were able to, that worked really well for us, involving people in the product teams, almost as temporary members of product teams and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
We have another question in here. Oh, it just disappeared. But I'm going to ask it anyway. But it was, how do we make frameworks compliance less scary and more fun and more approachable to those coming on? We've talked about jail already here, so I think that's one extreme. So Philippe, I'm going to start with you. Consider you're kind of in the fun space of children's products and things like that. What do you think about the idea of trying to make regulation and compliance more kind of easy, accessible, more fun, so that people can actually enjoy going through that? I mean, that's a big word. Maybe enjoy is too strong, but not hate going through compliance and frameworks.
So one thing we do is that we don't try to chase all the different certificates of all the frameworks, but they actually extremely helpful as a checklist, sort of like the run through. So that's one way to actually make them more accessible, is actually to let the engineers judge actually what is within our risk tolerance. So actually to focus where it matters. Again, like just going to the previous point, where actually there's some, each framework has some points where actually maybe that doesn't apply to you so much, or you're willing to take some risk. And just being able to skip through those because you're not chasing the certificate, but you're looking for actually to focusing on where the security matters, makes it less daunting. So you've gone to the fun, maybe not fun part, but where it actually makes a huge difference, and you don't have to sort of nitpick on every single point.
Yeah. I think a big thing with compliance is if people feel like it's useful, it becomes, I think, not fun, but it becomes like less. I think where compliance and regulatory checks really draw burden is when people feel like they're literally just ticking a box and they're achieving no real outcomes from it.
Exactly, because sort of you avoid the feeling that this is completely pointless. Why am I doing this? And it's going to take me days, and it's not going to make any difference. So, but in order to get the certificate, you have to do that. Yeah, no, definitely. Lee, what's your kind of opinion, being in a very heavily regulated space, about making kind of some of these frameworks more approachable, more accessible, or useful, I guess?
I think it takes a particular type of person to find these fun. But I think it's again a balancing act when you look at developer experience and productivity and keeping the business and your clients safe. And as long as it doesn't feel like this is a box-ticking exercise, but we're actually truly implementing certain controls to protect data, clients, money, etc. Most reasonable people actually understand. Like, for example, some of the recent a lot of headlines around various prompt injection attacks, like, which is why, for instance, in our business, I've disabled our ability to install certain browser extensions to run, for instance, I'm going to name any names, but particular AI vendors, their tooling. And the productivity could be incredible, but at the moment, I don't feel comfortable that I fully understand the implications of prompt injection through these type of plugins. Right? But when you explain that to people and outline the consequences of when things go wrong, most sensible people actually, oh yeah, I can see why we may be slightly more cautious here. So yeah, for me, it's very much around explain really why and avoid kind of administrative box-ticking exercises where you can.
Yeah, definitely.
If I can jump in.
Absolutely. I just going to use my glass that I got.
Go for it. I would definitely advocate for if you can, twice a year, if you're running hackathons, make one of the hackathons focused on security. Make them something that people can remediate on the day. You can work through the issues. And even better, if you do have the resources and you're capable of spending money on days like these, do a capture a flag or a test scenario day where your security team is stripping your business and showing you what pain they can inflict, and get your engineers involved in that so that they really understand the impact.
Yeah.
Involve your infra team, bring something down, show the product teams there is pain, and recover from it. And then you'll understand a little bit better rather than just doing an e-training.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick.
Yeah, I was just going to add, one of the, in a previous company, the compliance director helped to change the narrative of this. It wasn't related to security, but it was compliance. But he put a picture up of a Formula One racing car. And there was something around having brakes in the car allows the car to go faster. And I may be wrong, I'm not a Formula One expert, but it did help to change the narrative that the brakes actually help you to go faster. And it's also there to help your colleagues to be able to put things live safely or whatever. So in a way, it's protecting you and your customers, but you have to get the processes right. If they've got friction in or whatever, people are going to disengage with them.
Yeah.
So I think it's a mix of those, definitely.
And if you're a child entertainer at heart like me, you can come afterwards. I have plenty of board games I have designed as a compliance training. I've done Chutes and Ladders once, which was particularly popular. I've done an Oregon Trail, build your own company and maybe end up in front of Congress, no pun intended, if you don't do it very well. Next week, my team will play a Severance-based game on designing an evil or uneval company.
Yeah.
So.
And if you want to invest in Katarina's game startup,
It's my retirement plan, actually.
So that's fantastic. I feel like we're kind of like moving into an area where the other question, there's another question on there is, and Lee's kind of approach to this, talking about prompt injection and other areas, is how AI is going to start changing the game and start secure. And we're seeing, for the first time, we're seeing net new vulnerabilities since the creation of the internet, right? Because SQL injection's been around since 1998. We solved it in 1998. We still can't figure it out. I don't know why. But anyway, now we have new ones like prompt injection, like hallucination, like areas like that. How are these changing the narrative when it comes to security? And I guess when it comes to trying to, we also now have to explain all of this to the board, to the directors, to everyone to get more funding or more bandwidth to be able to deal with these. So how do you first think that this is going to have a big impact? How are we dealing with it? How can we kind of get support for that? Nick, you're nodding, so I'll start with you.
Yeah, I was just talking to our CISO yesterday about this, and he says they've observed two significant changes in the last several months. One is the AI is definitely helping less technical people attack companies, but it's also helping them to scale the attacks quicker than they would have done in the past on sort of traditional forms of attack. But the level of sophistication of the attacks is also changing. So they're noticing both of those things starting to increase a lot through the organizations we work with who help to protect our setups. I think our CISO is very good at engaging with our board, we call it the VCE, but our board in essence. He has ongoing conversations. He's in there every month talking about cybersecurity in general. But I think he's done a really good job of bringing them into the conversation and educating them about it. So I think in terms of AI, it will just be a natural extension of a conversation he's already been having around cybersecurity. And I think some of it's been brought about by recent incidents, the M&S incident and Jaguar Land Rover. That's definitely changed, certainly the Vice-Chancellor's view on, I think he had a strong view, but it's made it even stronger around the importance of these things.
Yeah, someone took Philip's advice and put the headline.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to see himself in jail or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were kind of saying, is that the AI hasn't really changed the types of attacks that we're seeing, but we're kind of given script kiddie superpowers, in a way. So, Katarina, how are you kind of seeing this evolve with such kind of a large company globally that you're working with?
I would definitely say, and this is my personal view, you can correct me, I think security has kind of become dumber in a way, because I think it's just things that people kind of knew to do before AI, and then because it's AI, they forgot.
Right.
And they just do whatever, because it's AI now, it's magic. So I think I was talking about a specific MCP that got released on Twitter that was supposedly for Google Workspace, and it was so official that after 2 scrolls, you found a little statement on there that said, this is not an official Google Workspace MCP. Thank you very much. There is a lot of people who will just jump and click and say, yes, because I like it, it's new and shiny, I want to do this.
Yeah.
So I think security has almost become so much more fundamental than I think it was before AI. Mm-hmm. And I think the antidote to that is you now have to become very, very good at your SDLC and very good at educating people on why they cannot forget those fundamentals, and you have to help them automate those fundamentals.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we're going to see a lot of.
Yeah. Philippe, what about you, being on the consumer side? How are you kind of dealing with the risks of AI, in your products or in your software?
We don't really use AI in the product as such, but in general, I'm cautiously optimistic actually, because all these kids with bad kids with AI scripting superpowers that can scale their attacks. And also all these, non-technical employees vibe coding all the different tools. That's sort of increasing the attack vector massively. But at the same time, you have the same tools, the AI, that actually can prevent a lot of this stuff, because humans make errors, and actually just us, for example, we're doing PR reviews with AI. It's catching so much stuff that would normally actually go through that human wouldn't spot. And those are the things that can be exploited by those kids with AI superpowers. So the critical thing is actually you have to keep up. So you really need to employ AI to actually be on top of the game, to catch all those things. There's always going to be human oversight needed. But if you don't actually leverage the AI to keep the scale and every single tiny bit catching it, then you're probably going to lose.
Yeah. And Lee, what's your opinion, being in such a heavily regulated kind of in this high stakes industry, about using AI in a product or using it to develop a product?
It's a similar sentiment that I have as Philip, where I think as long as you also raise your own game, then I wouldn't say you're all right, but you can at least keep up. As in, you have people trying to defraud or attack your business using AI tools to either scale the number of attacks or attempts, but equally you can use AI tools to increase your internal reviews, use AI-powered tools to maybe supplement your kind of security pen test firm with automated pen tests. You can do level up when it comes to code reviews, all these type of things. So I think it is necessary that you also level up. Because if you don't, then of course you are disadvantaged. I'm whilst obviously it is something that I'm worrying about, one of the things I'm most worried about is some of the novel attacks I've seen now, which are, there's a part of me that feels like, wow, that's respect for someone coming up with that. But equally, it's horrifying that, the recent one where I think someone embedded a prompt in a GitHub kind of a title, and you have now more and more AI agents taking the tasks and was reading it, and those type of things.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's pretty ingenious.
Yeah, I don't know if you know, but that was actually our research team. We hacked Google Gemini because Google Gemini was using Google Gemini in their GitHub Actions, and we were able to prompt inject it, along with 5 other Fortune 500 companies, to be able to access their secrets. What scares me about this is that and when you look at how they solved it, unlike other forms of kind of code injection, where you can do it, prompt injection is almost unsolvable at a technological level in terms of, like, you can always trick someone. So it is scary. But I want to kind of ask another one of my questions that I had set up, because this is I'm going to be selfish again, and then I'll get back to one more question. But I'm curious to ask, if you guys could start again from the beginning, if you pretend that your companies didn't exist at its day one, what is the most important security tools or processes that you would put in place from day one? So Leo, I'll start with you. Like, what would your day one security kind of process or solutions kind of look like at Flagstone?
Definitely make sure that your architecture, cloud platform, everything is as simple as possible, because of what I mentioned earlier around complexity is the biggest risk. And I would also reduce the number of tools and vendors, and actually make sure that the few you use them properly. Because at some point it gets out of hand, and then engineers have to deal with 5, 6, 7 different tools. Of course, none of them are then used properly, and there's almost no point in having them. So you're better off, instead of having 6, to just have 2, and those are used well. So low complexity in your software architecture, and keep it quite simple when it comes to vendors and tooling.
Yeah. Philippe?
Yeah, I would echo that. So just do as little as possible. Try to, avoid building stuff if you don't necessarily need to build it, because then you have to maintain it, keep it secure. So whether it's buying actually someone who specializes in that area and using those tools, or just try to think whether do you need that? Can you avoid, like, for example, serverless is a great example where actually you don't really need those servers, and it's such a relief not having to worry about the 0-day exploits and all this kind of stuff. So try to simplify as much as you can.
Yeah, anything to add?
I think just echo, make it simple.
Yeah, I would, on top of that, just the basics, identity, resilience, and detection. Make sure you've got things in place to help you with those. Resilience in particular, where you're hearing these horror stories, I think M&S and whatever, again, around backups being encrypted. So make sure you've got things like immutable backups and that kind of stuff. But there are basic things that could prevent a lot of the incidents that still come in today.
Yeah.
AI things aside, obviously. Yeah.
We're coming to the end. We've got 2 minutes left. So I'm going to ask a question here, one that hopefully we can get through quickly, which is that humans are the biggest and most effective attack vector. And we haven't really talked about humans so much in this. So does AI make that more or less true? I thought this was a very interesting question. So Nick, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I'm thinking yes, just because probably something you said earlier, that, we don't quite know what we're doing with this stuff, and the impact of doing something with AI. But there's still a human at the start of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say yes.
The dopamine effect, absolutely yes. I think the 7-second attention span to every decision we make, plus the feel good of doing something. I think OpenClaw is a very good example of how quickly people just give root access to anything. That then installs itself again and again and again, and racks up a giant bill, or does worse. But yeah, I think the dopamine effect, unfortunately, will get us as humans, and I think we will be the weakest link, always.
Always optimist. Philippe?
Yeah, I think this is probably the scariest part for me, that actually, social engineering, people always, or not always, usually are the weakest link. right? And sort of AI superpowers where you can hyper-personalize the attack and scale it. That's, yeah, people have to adapt, and I don't know, not sure what's going to come out of it, but yeah, definitely scary.
And Lee?
Yeah, I mean, as long as people have email inboxes, that will always be the biggest risk. The thing that keeps me awake isn't necessarily the AI bit. It's clients that we have who have an personal email account and aren't necessarily protecting it as much as they could or should.
Yeah.
Because once you have access to someone's email, then the world is your oyster. And that's, so human is and will remain for a very long time probably the weakest link. And so AI can exploit it, but we can also use AI to kind of fight it. So it's again, a bit of best of both worlds.
Well, we're exactly on time, so I want to thank the panelists here. I think it was a fascinating conversation. You all have very different perspectives, which makes this fun and interesting. So could everyone please give a round of applause for our panelists here, Lee, Philippe, Katarina, and Nick.